All right. Hello, everybody. There's nobody here yet, but I'm recording this for the replay as well. Welcome. My name is Dr. Robert Duff. If you don't know me, I'm a clinical psychologist and author of some books, a podcast, and an online course. So I'm hopping in tonight mainly to sit here and answer some questions about anxiety. So as soon as some people show up and have questions, I'm happy to answer them. I'm primarily also here to talk to you about my course, which is launching tomorrow. So I'll tell you a little bit about the course and what's going on with that, and then I'll answer some questions from the audience about anxiety or mental health in general. So first, I want to talk about the course. Some of you guys have heard about it before, but it's called Kick Anxiety's Ass. It's a 10-week online course. I say 10 weeks, but that just means that there's 10 modules. In each module, there's 3 different lessons, and it covers everything from how to talk to people about anxiety, breathing strategies, how to fix your thought patterns, how to manage your news and social media intake, diet, exercise. It covers the whole range of things. And my goal is basically to stuff what I do in therapy over months and months and months into a nice little tight package that's over 10 weeks. And it's self-paced. You can go through it as quickly or as slowly as you want. And once you buy it, you have lifetime access to it. So you can always go back and review things or take it as slow as you would like. So it's a really, really good course, and I'm highly anticipating that the people who have bought it are gonna get a lot out of it. I'm really proud of it. It's been about a year in the making that I've been going through writing the scripts, making the videos, putting everything together. It's really been a labor of love, and I'm super excited to actually click the launch button tomorrow. When it launches tomorrow on August 1st, it'll be open for 2 weeks, which means that you can enroll for that 2-week period anytime within that. But after that, it'll close, and anybody who did buy it will have that lifetime access to it. But after it's closed, you won't be able to do it again until next year. So you got to get in while you can. The reason I'm doing the live stream right now, though, is that currently there's a discount for pre-ordering, which is a whole $100 off. So the course itself costs $300, but right now it's $200. And there are also payment plans available right now where you can pay $50 a month instead of a whole chunk of $200. So if you're really interested in potentially getting the course, you're going to need to act on that in the next few hours so that you can get that $100 discount. Otherwise, you're going to be paying a little bit more tomorrow or next week or the week after, which is cool too. That just supports me more if you want to pay full price. But if you're limited at all, or you really want to save the money, you want to get in right now. Otherwise, it's going to poof and go away. So that's the spiel about the course. I want to answer some questions that you guys might have about anxiety, or if you have other sort of mental health questions, psychology, self-help, whatever, I'm here. Any tips for travel anxiety? Yeah. So there's this cool thing you could do that I actually talk about and show you how to do in the course, but I'll show you here right now too. Something called a normalization card. So what you do is you get a card. I'm just gonna use a Post-it right now, but you could use like a 3x5 card, or you can even do it digitally. And what you do is on one side, you write down the trigger, the thing that's gonna make you anxious, right? So in your case, it's travel anxiety. So maybe being stuck in getting onto the plane or something like that. So I'll write down sitting down on plane. So you put sitting down on plane. I'm not sure if this is reversed for you guys or not. And then what you would do on the back is you would write down your typical anxious response, and then your rationalization. So you would write down your anxious response and your rationalization. So for instance, for you it might be, okay, my trigger is when I sit down and buckle myself into the plane. My typical anxious response is that I feel like I'm suffocating. I feel like I don't have enough breath. I'm worried that I'm going to have to use the bathroom and I won't be able to escape and get out. Things of that sort. You kind of know what your pattern is. So you write that down and kind of go through that process. And then as you're sitting there, and this is you not stressed out, this is you kind of being more rational when you're not traveling, you write down a rationalization to that. So, okay, I've never passed out in my life from anxiety. I know that's not going to happen. That's just my brain playing tricks on me. Or if I really need to get up and it's an emergency, I can raise my hand and talk to the flight attendant and do so. You write down a few rationalizations that help to rein in those automatic, really self-defeating, negative, crazy thoughts that you might have because of anxiety. and then you actually bring it with you. So when you're going and doing the thing, whether it's the plane or whatever, you bring your normalization card with you. When you're in the situation, you go, oh God, I'm starting to like hyperventilate, or I feel like I'm suffocating. Okay, let me pull out my card. I expected this. And what did my rational mind say back then when I could still think? And then you look at it. So that's one thing that you could do. That's one thing that you could do, is write a normalization card or a series of normalization cards and bring them with you. I'm going to scroll up. There are some other questions here. Any tips for learning new things? I'm in college, but nothing seems to stick. I'll study for hours, but only about 25% sticks to my brain. So it's hard to say exactly what would help you without knowing you. One thing that's really important that a lot of people don't prioritize is sleep. So sleep is really, really massively important for learning. And you've probably heard that in a variety of different contexts, but it is. I was not a good example of this when I was in school. I was so shitty at sleep in school. High school, college, grad school. It's funny because I was actually just talking about this in the course that I was recording, but during grad school, there was a period where I'm like, I can just sleep every other day. I don't need to sleep every night. I can sleep every other night. That'll work out, which was stupid, especially because I had like an hour-long commute. So that was dumb. But the reason sleep is important for learning is that there's a part of your brain kind of deep in here called the hippocampus. It's like this little seahorse-shaped thing. And that's the part of your brain that's responsible for transferring your memories from the day into your storage. And that happens during your sleep, during that deep REM sleep. And so if you're not getting adequate sleep, you're not going to be internalizing those memories as efficiently as you could. For instance, people who have narcolepsy, which is a sleep disorder where they don't get REM sleep, every time they're about to get REM sleep, they actually get pulled out of it. And so they're chronically sleepy, and it seems like they're always falling asleep, but they're not actually getting deep, restful sleep. People with narcolepsy tend to have really bad memories because of that, because they're not giving themselves the chance. Well, it's not their fault. They're not giving themselves a chance, but they can't internalize those memories and transfer them in the way that we want to. So sleep is a really big one. You also want to try to pay attention to what your study habits are. You want to see what works for you. If you're doing the same thing and it's not working, you might need to adjust a bit, whether that's limiting environmental distractors, whether that's just finding a different approach that tends to stick better. Some people are better at kind of brute forcing it and practicing over and over. Other people need to elaborate more and connect it to something. That's something that I feel like for a lot of colleges, there's your resource center or the library. There are people on campus who might be able to help you with the study skills. So that's one thing you would want to do. So prioritizing the sleep, looking at what your study strategies are, and really just trying to not be stubborn. If you say, oh God, I can't concentrate, but you have like 30,000 tabs open, you have music with lyrics, there's a movie on TV, and there's roommates, of course you're not going to remember shit, right? So try to be realistic about it too, and don't be stubborn. All right, let's see. When I have an anxiety attack, the come down is the hardest part. Crying, shaking, dizziness. How can I calm this quicker or more quickly? It's tough. Anxiety is something that is by nature really uncomfortable. It's not harmful. It's not going to hurt you physically. It's not going to really cause problems in an immediate sense. If you're anxious for your whole life, you're going to have some risk factors that other people might not have. But having a panic attack or a strong anxiety attack is not going to hurt you physically. It's going to make you feel like you're being hurt, though. It's going to make you feel really uncomfortable, and I understand that. So what you're saying is when you have that buildup, you kind of crash afterward. And it makes a lot of sense because the body, when it goes through a panic attack, it's essentially going through like a fight or flight response. There's a part of your nervous system called the sympathetic nervous system. And that does things like, raise your heart rate and increase your breathing rate, dilate your pupils, increase your muscle tone, get blood flowing through your body, basically to prepare you for action. And that's not a sustainable way of being. So when you have like a panic attack or really strong anxiety, you get a flood of all of that stuff and you crash afterwards because that's meant for short-term immediate action. But when it's over kind of a more extended period here and there's no real purpose to it, you crash and it sucks. If you were like walking in the street and a car was coming at you and you leapt out of the way and you had that whole fight or flight response and then you felt a little off and weird afterward, you probably wouldn't give yourself much crap about that. You'd take it in stride because there was a reason for it. But in this case, there's no reason for it. The reason is your thoughts that are prompting that reaction. And so it's really concerning and uncomfortable and not happy when you have those sort of after symptoms. So, what I would say is the things that help with physiological anxiety are going to also be things that can help you with the kind of calm down period. I talked about the sympathetic nervous system, right? The one that does the fight or flight response. The other half of that is what's called the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's the part that we call the rest and digest nervous system. So it basically comes in and cleans up the mess after your panic attack or after a fight or flight response. So it slows everything down, it cleans up, it gets you back to that like nice homeostasis. And the best way to kick that off, the best way to sort of initiate that reaction is through deep breathing. And when I say deep breathing, I don't just mean take a few deep breaths and hope that it works. Ideally, you're actually practicing your breathing exercises. And in the course, I run you through exactly how to do that, how to train yourself to, you need to teach yourself how to relax, teach your body how to go through the process of initiating that response, and do it repeatedly when you're not under pressure, so that when you are, you're able to rely on that skill to kind of bring you back down. And so doing that even after a panic attack, if you're not able to kind of, avoid the panic attack from doing that, doing it afterward can help too, because it can help sort of just flush everything out and calm you down. And then you got to have some grace with yourself, realize that you're allowed to feel shitty for a few minutes or an hour or whatever it is. You had an experience that was not fun for you, and it's okay to be kind of rocked by that and need to be uncomfortable for a little bit. It goes away eventually. And so trying to be good to yourself and, maybe give yourself that chance to rest or do what makes you feel a little bit better, go ahead and do that so that you're not just pushing yourself harder and harder and harder. All right, what else we got here? Does lack of sleep induce higher anxiety? Yes, it definitely can. Basically, there's a lot of factors to it. So we talked about the learning part, which is important when you're trying to recover from anxiety. For instance, you're essentially trying to learn a series of skills, and you can't do that well if you're not sleeping. The other thing that lack of sleep does is it makes you have less patience and less energy. And anxiety is exhausting. It takes a lot out of you. I like to think of it as you're sort of processing the world in two ways at once. You sort of go through the world in your, I don't want to call it normal, but sort of the typical lens. And then you're also going through it with the anxious lens and processing it at the same time. And that takes a lot of mental energy and physical energy too. Fatigue is a real part of anxiety for a lot of people. Forgot the question. What was I answering? I totally lost my train of thought with that. Oh, lack of sleep. And, when you have lack of sleep, that only makes that more difficult. And then, of course, lack of sleep makes you feel weird. And with anxiety, one of the primary sources of, troubling symptoms is when you have a physical sensation, but you misinterpret it. So your body feels something like, okay, my heart skips a beat, or I feel off in some sort of way. And then your mind, your anxious mind, will overinterpret that, say, oh, that means that something's wrong, or oh, you're having a panic attack. Let's go ahead and just have a panic attack. And so it sort of misinterprets these cues, and that gets you into trouble with anxiety. So a variety of things can contribute to that. If you're not well regulated in general, like you're not eating well and your body feels off because of that, or exercising or sleeping well, I really, really think the fundamentals are important, because that helps you feel more stable and centered and more sort of in control of your body. And when you feel out of control, anxiety picks up the reins and says, oh, that's really dangerous. Here, let me kick in and save you. So I definitely think that sleep can absolutely exacerbate anxiety that's there. What else we got? Victoria, you asked a question about how to better retain information while reading and or studying. When the replay comes, scroll back a little bit. I did answer a question very similar to that. Last week I went to the emergency room. They thought I had a stroke, but I found out I had a severe anxiety panic attacks. Symptoms are almost the same. You are not alone. Every day in probably every hospital, there are people who are going in thinking they're having a stroke or a heart attack or something like that, and it turns out to be a panic attack, because it can be exceptionally scary. And like I said, your brain misinterprets those cues where you may have something that is, not normal, but it's not a sign of danger. And your body's going to go, or your mind is going to go, oh God, that was something bad. I might be having a heart attack. I'm about the right age. I have a family history. And it's going to freak out. and that's only going to elevate things, and so you wind up in the emergency room, which is it's not fun to do that, and sometimes people are embarrassed by it and everything like that. But it is really, really common. Most people who have like full-on panic disorder have done that before. So you're not alone in that. I know it sucks, but it does happen. All right, let's see what else we got. Death anxiety. A lot of people are talking about the death anxiety about kind of just a generalized existential dread of something going wrong. You know, there's a variety of things that can help. One thing that I think is really helpful for that is sort of mindfulness-based approaches. By mindfulness, I mean, I've actually made a video about mindfulness on the channel, which you could check out. But what mindfulness allows you to do when you train it as a skill is it allows you to recognize things that are usually you might consider them unwelcome thoughts or distractions. And rather than, really, really amplifying them and trying to push them away, which in turn makes them bigger, it allows you to sort of accept them and just roll with it. Like, okay, yes, I'm dreading that I might die at any moment, and I'm going to focus on this thing that I'm trying to focus on, rather than, oh God, I'm thinking about it again. Let's push it out. Let's get rid of that. And then it just gets bigger and bigger until you freeze or, whatever happens. So mindfulness is a really big one. I think, kind of accepting the fact that you do have that fear and that's okay is a big part of it, and allowing it to kind of coexist with all of your other thoughts and getting better at staying on task. And when I say task, I mean, trying to be very present and task focused. If you're focusing on something, if you're busy doing something, that's what you want to pour your attention into. And rather than avoiding something else, you're just instead amplifying a different thing. Does that make sense? Instead of saying, okay, I'm not going to think about that, I'm not going to think about that, I'm not going to think about that, you're going to look at something else that you do want to think about and try to increase that, right? Try to focus on that. So that's one tip. James Granara, if you're in here, thank you. You just bought the course. Appreciate that. If not, well, now you know. Hunter asks, I was full of anxiety for months on end last year, and then the following year I felt numb to most negative feeling, and it makes me feel like I'm not really handling a situation. Is that a thing? Yeah, it's, again, all of this stuff, you need to take it with a grain of salt. I don't know you in particular, so I can't comment on your specific situation. In some cases, there's a type of depression-related disorder, which is called, well, it used to be called dysthymia. Now they call it persistent depressive disorder. And it's kind of like a low-grade, long-term depression rather than having a big spike in depression. And one of the big symptoms of that is something called anhedonia, which is like, it literally means inability to feel. And I think a lot of people have been there at a certain point, but for people who have it as like a depression symptom, it can be very, very pervasive. And so anhedonia basically means that you don't feel really happy about things, but you also don't feel really sad about things. Everything just sort of feels meh. It kind of hits you and it is what it is, and you don't really have big spikes up or down in your emotional state. Now for you, you said you were anxious kind of for a really, really, really long time. I'm wondering if this is sort of a defense mechanism for you, that you're realizing that the state of being totally anxious on end day after day all the time is not sustainable, and you can't live like that. So your body's just kind of turning it off. And so, I wouldn't say like you're avoiding dealing with it. I wouldn't say it's a failure to deal with what's going on, except it's not going to be the thing that solves the problem entirely. By that, I mean, turning off and just kind of keeping your head down and floating through the day is not a bad thing. It'll keep you going and you'll be able to do what you need to do, which in a way is a type of coping. But I don't think that is necessarily going to be sustainable over the long term if there's stuff under the surface that really needs to be addressed. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Okay, good question here. How can I tell situational anxiety from an actual disorder? I'm 16 and living in a family that causes me anxiety, which has affected everything I do. When I move out, can and will it get better? Um, so it can, and you're right that it's a difficult thing to be able to tell, what is what. When you live in a shitty situation, you're going to feel shitty. When you're in a situation that's constantly causing you stress, trying to alleviate that stress can be an uphill battle. It's not your fault necessarily that you can't make yourself feel calm and unanxious because you're constantly being fed things that make you anxious. I think that right now, as a 16-year-old, it's really going to be helpful to you to bring in as much positivity as you can. Now you're here, you're on the internet, you're watching a video from me or a live video from me. This is a really good sort of thing to be doing for you, a good start. You know, um, you have your headphones in a lot, I'm sure. Pump in positive things, pump in inspirational things and things that help you understand what you're going through, help you understand your life, because you're going to be inundated with things that are stressful. I don't know your family, but it's completely possible that you just have a shitty family and they're not supportive and they have their own problems and things like that. And that's what it is. It's circumstance. Family is circumstance. You didn't ask for it. You just got dropped into this family and here you are. But you do have the ability to bring in other resources. You do have the ability to bring in other influences. There's a classic quote. It's a Jim Rohn quote. You probably heard it, which is, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." Well, I think that also applies to the internet. You can bring in a set of influences online that are going to help shape and bias you in the right way rather than biasing you in a negative way. Will it get better? It certainly can. There are many people who come from problematic family backgrounds, and once they're able to break out of that, they're able to alleviate a lot of that. Is it going to have spillover effects? Probably, right? You're going to take some of that with you. Right now, you're in a very formative stage where you're 16 years old. You're getting a lot of your own thoughts and independence, but there's still a part of your brain that's developing, and you're still trying to figure out how the hell this crazy ass world works. And so right now you're developing a lot of those models and trying to just put all that together. So the influence from your family in this stressful situation is part of that. And you're going to take that with you as you continue to grow and everything like that. But that's not like a death sentence. That doesn't mean you're not going to be able to make something of yourself. That does not mean that doesn't mean you're going to be able to, not be able to, tripping over my words. It doesn't mean you won't be able to overcome the anxiety that you're feeling right now. So I just want you to have hope. I want you to pump in positivity and those good influences into your ears and focus on what you do have control over rather than all the things that you don't. Let's see. I actually, before I answer the next question, I did want to say that. So for anybody that doesn't get a chance to ask a question here, you guys probably know I do have a podcast, and these are the kind of questions that I answer on the podcast. If you just go to my website, duffthepsych.com, there's a link to the podcast on there, or you can email me at duffthepsych@gmail.com and send me in questions, and I answer these questions every week on the podcast. So I'm going to be cutting it off in a few minutes here. So if you don't get the chance to, please, send me a question via email, and I'll consider it for an upcoming podcast. Or an email that I send out, whatever. I put out obviously a ton of content here. Hey Duff, just wondering if you're completely out of the ASMR game. Kinda. I consider myself retired. That doesn't mean that I can't do any ASMR videos. I've done, I think, 2 since I officially retired. Maybe once or twice a year, but it's nothing that I'm prioritizing. Though I did a ASMR audio, which was on my podcast. I did a podcast about ASMR, like what is it and everything like that. And at the end, I did a little audio role play. So if you haven't heard anything from me for a long time and you're just jonesing for some tingles, then you could listen to that podcast episode. I'll look at the episode number. I'll pull it up really quick. Da-da-da-da. My computer's over here. it was episode 112. So you just go to deaththepsych.com/episode 112. And to the question of what does ASMR stand for, I talk about all that in the episode. So check out the episode. I explain kind of what it means and everything like that, what it doesn't mean. Let me see a few more questions here. Can social anxiety stem from excessive coddling in childhood? I think that it's more complicated than that. Nature and nurture play a role here. The genes that you inherit, the physical things that you go through, and then the social experience of your life, these all play a role. So in some cases, yeah, I don't know that coddling, as you call it, is going to be the only thing that caused your social anxiety. But being raised in a situation where you never are in a position to build your own coping skills, you're never in a position to build your own self-efficacy, meaning a confidence in yourself to be able to handle situations because they're always just handled for you. I think that could set you up to have a hard time figuring things out and learning how to cope with social difficulties, and then that kind of piles on and you get this sort of anxious rollover effect, like this spiral that happens. That's the way that I think it could play a role there. All right, just a few more here. Let's see. Is it possible to faint when you have a panic attack? I don't drive because I get scared of that I may faint. I'm not going to say that it's impossible to faint from having a panic attack. Rarely does it happen. And the thing you want to challenge yourself on is like when you faint, if anybody, for one, if you've never fainted in your life, there's some proof for you, right? Like you need to look at your track record, look at the evidence you have at your disposal. Have I ever fainted from a panic attack? No. Okay, well then why would I faint from a panic attack? So you want to think about that. But even if you did faint from it, it doesn't just happen like that. It's not like you're walking around and suddenly you fall over, right? And it's not like you're driving and suddenly you fall over. I actually had a period of time in grad school when I was under significant stress. This is actually, I think, around the time that I started watching and making ASMR videos during my comprehensive exams. But I had an anxiety thing that popped up where I was convinced similarly that I just felt like I wasn't getting enough oxygen when I was driving. I just felt like tingly and like I might pass out. And I would just basically challenge myself. And so I'd say, okay, well, if I'm actually going black around the edges, then I can pull over and stop for a little bit. Until that point, I'm going to keep driving and just be careful. And then eventually, when you allow yourself to prove yourself wrong, you can kind of move past that a bit. Anxiety most often leads to avoidance. And then when you avoid, you feed back into that anxiety. Reason being is anxiety wants you to think that a situation is dangerous and that it's saving you from that by avoiding it. But the thing is, the thing that it's saving you from may or may not even be true. You can only tell if it's true or not by doing some sort of experiment and actually, pushing yourself to do that thing. So, you want to try to prove yourself wrong a little bit. And if it's something that's really, really bad, there are things that you can do. For instance, in the course during, think module 2, I give you some different anxiety induction exercises where you can actually bring yourself to the point where it feels like you might pass out and prove to yourself that really it's not as bad as you think, and you're not going to pass out. And if you want to, you can actually work through it. So that's one thing that you can do to actually kind of train yourself to not have that sort of reaction, among other things, exposing yourself to the situation, all sorts of stuff. Well, a lot of people, so in continuing to answer this question, a lot of people do feel like they're gonna, a lot of people really do feel like they're going to faint when they have a panic attack. That's very normal. It's normal to have tingling sensations in your feelings and in your extremities. It's normal to either hyperventilate or feel kind of like you're suffocating, like you can't get enough oxygen. And basically, again, what your body does is it takes these sensations and it magnifies them, makes them bigger. So you get really scared of that. In reality, you're probably not having that strong of a reaction physically. You're not having it's not as strong as it feels, but you're putting a big magnifying glass on it and it feels really catastrophic. And so, yeah, it's totally normal to feel like you're going to faint. But again, in those cases, I would ask you to kind of look to the evidence of what's happened before and what options you have at your disposal. That's one of the best things you can do is say, okay, even if the worst case scenario is true, you still have options there. And is it really as bad as you think it is, even if it is in the worst case scenario? All right, let's see. I think I should probably cut it. It's been about 30 minutes. It's almost 9 o'clock now. I do have a little bit more work to do before I push that button to launch the course at midnight. So again, if you didn't have your question answered, shoot me an email or go to the website, duffthepsych.com, and you can ask me a question for the podcast. And if you think that the things I said made sense, if they ring true to you and you feel like you want to work on some of this stuff, that's exactly what the course is for. There's 10 different modules. Each module has 3 different lessons. Each lesson has a video of me talking to you just like this, explaining the concepts, walking you through it step by step. There's a written summary of things. There's printables and handouts. I really feel like it's mostly everything you need to really get started in taking your life back from anxiety. So I put the link in the description here. You can go to kickanxietycourse.com. If you have any further questions about it, shoot me a message anywhere and I'll answer them. And I appreciate you guys. Again, if you didn't catch the beginning of it, the reason I'm talking about the course right now is that you have 3 hours left to get $100 off the full price of it, because once it's done once it's out of pre-order, then it's going to be full price. So you got about 3 hours left for that, give or take. I might get a little lazy on pushing the button, but about 3 hours left to save $100 on it. And then again, there are payment plans available. If that's a lot of money for you to drop at once, you could split it up into multiple payments. So thank you guys. I really want to be doing more live streams and videos and everything like that for YouTube. I've been neglecting YouTube a little bit, but that's because I've been working so much on this goddamn course. But it's just about done now, so that'll free up my time a little bit, and I would like to do more stuff like this. So thank you for coming by, and hope you have a really, really, really good week. Bye. If I could find the end button. There it goes. See ya.